think a couple of you can hear me. I hope you guys are all doing well. We're going to wait a couple more minutes for some people to join us. Looks like we got a couple more people coming in, a couple more people connecting. I hope you guys are all doing well. It's been a crazy week, couple weeks, couple months. Let's see, we got a couple more people joining right now. Got a couple more people connecting up. All right. My name is Ethan. I'm a product manager here at Box. Today we're going to talk about our tri-pack clutch, our limited slip clutch. I'll show you guys how to service and adjust it. Generally, I wait till a couple minutes past the hour. Currently it's 10:59, so we're going to wait a couple more minutes. I know we got a couple more people that are going to jump in on this webinar. So if you guys have any questions for me, you can just type them into chat as usual, and I can maybe answer some questions if you guys have any before we officially start here. Yeah, here we go. We got a couple more people joining on right now. Hope you guys are all doing well. There's my chat window. There's my chat. Yeah, if you guys have any questions for me, please let me know. Type it into chat. Vidya, it's good to see you again. So stoked on getting Box 2 drivetrain with Box One shifter. Yeah, we're doing some upgrades on those right now, some promotionals. So if you're looking to get a Box 2 drivetrain, we'll upgrade you for free to a Box One shifter. I think that promotion is just starting now. Should be going on for a little bit. All right, got a couple more people joining on. Just gonna wait a couple more minutes. Today we'll mostly be talking about the Box 1 and 2 clutch. I will touch a little bit on 3 and 4 and the limited slip clutch that they have versus the tri-pack. I actually have two of them right here. So we'll talk a little bit about the differences between them, but I'll be taking the tri-pack clutch apart. I'll show you guys how to service it, clean it, put it back together, and adjust it as well. Let's see here. Got a couple more people jumping on. I'm just gonna wait a couple more minutes. Just make sure everybody's here before we start. If you guys have any questions for me, please type it into chat and I'll do my best to answer your questions. I just got a question from John. Just installed my Box One 1150 and it's stiffened a few gears. Any way to adjust that? When you say stiffen a few gears, it could be a couple different things. Generally, that's referring to it being hard to press on the shifter. If that is the case, there's a couple things I would recommend looking at. Primarily, how good your cable housing is and how it routes through your frame or on your frame. We have a couple e-bikes here that is definitely something that is observed when you first set up a drivetrain. One of the biggest offenders that we have is a specialized Kenevo. And on that frame, because of the way the internal routing is, the cable actually snakes through the frame and does a bunch of zigzags. And after riding it for a little bit, it definitely breaks in. The quality of the cable housing directly affects how much friction all of those bends add up to. So on that frame, because it's an e-bike and the battery, like the cable goes under the battery and then it goes around the motor, and then it goes up and over where the bottom bracket is on the motor and then in through the chainstay. It's got a bunch of really, really sharp bends. Adjusting your clutch isn't going to help very much with that. Generally, if you have more gap in your B adjustment, it might help make that a little bit easier as well. But if you do have any more detailed questions, feel free to send me an email, ethan@boxcomponents.com. I'll do my best to get to you. But for right now, we're 5 minutes past the hour. It's 11:05, so we're going to start this off. My name is Ethan. I'm a product manager here at Box Components. I spend a lot of time in Taiwan, spend some time designing and developing products. One of my big projects is stealth hubs. That will be coming out from Mountain Bike very soon. But today we'll be talking about our clutches, our clutch technologies, and I'm going to show you the differences between our limited slip clutch, which is on box 3 and 4, and our tri-pack clutch, which is on box 1 and 2. We'll talk about some of the differences between them, and then I'll show you how to disassemble, clean, service, and reassemble and adjust a tri-pack clutch. So this is pretty interesting. So if you guys have any questions, I always say this, type them into the chat. I'll do my best to answer them as they come up. That's one of the beauties of this webinar format, is that I can kind of answer your questions as you have them, so that I can better give you guys answers as we go through this, because I know maybe not everything I'm doing is so clear. Additionally, if you guys have any feedback that you'd like to provide us, there is a link, I believe, Chloe can provide through chat. And this feedback's super important to us. It helps me do better with these webinars, as well as make our products better and give you guys some insight into areas where you have questions. So feel free to type questions in the chat. we have a feedback section on our website that we'll spam out to you. And yeah, feel free to give me any feedback you have. It's super important to us. All right. So one of the big questions that we always get is, what does a clutch do and why is it needed? And for most of us riding 2 or 3 by drivetrains on older bikes, what a clutch is maybe not super understood. Now, when you have a front derailleur, you really don't need a clutch because the chain is held by the front derailleur on the front chain rings, and it switches the gears between them. If you remove that front derailleur though, and just go ride your bike, the chain has no way to really stay on those gears. And that's because the teeth profiles and the ramps on the gears that are meant to have multiple speeds allow them to shift intentionally, right? If they had narrow, wide features like we see on some of the newer single chain rings, then there's no way it could shift between gears. So what the clutch physically does is keeps the cage from moving forward too fast. So generally clutches only work in one direction. So when I extend this cage down, I have to get past the clutch force to do that. Then when I let go of this, there's no clutch force in that direction. It's only on the forward. Let's see if I get my hand out of this. It's always only on the forward swing of the derailleur cage. So what that does is it really helps keep the chain on the front chain ring. It helps keep the derailleur in line with the gear, so you're not go shifting or losing gears. And then obviously it really reduces any kind of sound that the bike makes from the chain slapping around or the derailleur flopping around. So it's a really stable system when you do have a clutch. Now, if you look at any 1x system, you'll see most of them have a clutch in it. Some of them are adjustable. Some of them use one-way bearings. Some of them have ratchets. There's many ways to do this. Our original clutch design was not like the current ones we use. It was called the cam clutch, and it actually had a rotating assembly. So as the cage would spin forward, it would rotate apart, and there was a rubber surface on there that would provide friction. And it worked. It was very elementary, and we learned through a couple of years that we could make some pretty big performance improvements by going to a friction style clutch that has a one-way bearing in it. And that's really what our both of our limited slip clutch and our tri-pack clutch do now. So clutches are really important for 1x systems. All box components, drivetrains are specifically designed to be 1x systems, meaning that they don't have multiple front gears. So all of our derailleurs from box 4 all the way up to box 1 have clutches in them. So I'm going to switch my camera here. Let's see, hopefully this works. Yeah. Hi. So here I have some examples of different box clutches. So on the right, we have a box tri-pack clutch. And then this is just a knuckle from the derailleur. So it's this part here that houses the clutch. So it kind of looks like this. And then on the left, we have our limited slip clutch. So we have 2 different clutches on purpose because of the price point differences between box 4 and box 1. So to provide a really high performance serviceable clutch would not allow us to have a more affordable derailleur. So it has all the same features and technical performance, but it's much simpler. So it's definitely a good way to get a clutch on a bike so you can have a cheaper 1x system, but it doesn't have all the performance of our box 1 and 2 clutch. So again, Box 1 and 2 have tri-pack, which is our high performance, serviceable, removable clutch system. This is patented. And then box 3 and 4 have our limited slip clutch. I hope you guys can kind of see some of this. So just looking into some of the differences here. This is, again, a limited slip clutch. So you have the clutch shaft, which has a precision ground surface on it. It's completely heat treated, so it's very hard. I'll move some of the stuff out of the background so you can kind of see a little bit better. And then this section here is physically what goes into the knuckle in the cage, and then this part gets bolted to the cage via these two holes. You can see through it if I hold it like this. And if you look here, this hex-looking bolt in there, I can't get it too close because it goes out of focus, but it's actually a one-way bearing. So it's got a little arrow on it, as you can kind of see in there. And what that does is, just like I was showing before, it only translates the clutch force in one direction. So I can, let's see if I can hold this up. I can spin this freely one direction. See, it spins very easily, no problems. And then if I try to spin it the other way with all my might, I physically cannot move it. And obviously, I don't have enough leverage with my fingers and this little surface here to actually spin it. But this is engineered in a way to provide a clutch force by slipping this bearing on this surface. So it's a very simple system, right? The bearing is only designed to freely move in one direction, and then if you go the other direction, it will slip at a certain torque. Realistically, for this clutch system, it's only 2 pieces. So that's how we are able to make a system like this so affordable. There's not too many other rear derailleurs that are the same price point as Box 4. So this is our limited slip clutch. Now I'm going to share my screen because I made a cool, let's see if I can do this here. All right, share my screen. All right, so I think you guys can see this here. Oh, actually, I'm not sure if that's shared. Can you guys see my screen? I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm kind of new to Zoom. Anyway, this is the exploded view of our tri-pack clutch. So you can see, comparing to what I just showed you for our limited slip clutch, this is much more complex. It has a lot more components to it. And I'll go through and I'll explain what each one of these do. So starting from the right side here, we have the clutch and the cage shaft. So on the back side of this, the cage of the derailleur physically gets bolted to this shaft. So this shaft spins with the cage. It is hardened stainless steel, so it has a very hard surface and a very high resistance to corrosion. That's necessary because it interfaces with the next piece, which is the one-way roller bearing. This is the same technology that we use in the limited slip clutch, but it is a better bearing with higher specs, and actually the torque on it that it needs to overcome for that shaft to slip in it is much higher than with our limited slip clutch. So this is how we're able to get clutch forces that are, very high. You can adjust this Box One clutch to a point where you physically cannot move the cage. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to do that because then you're creating an environment where the system cannot function. But you could do that. With a limited slip clutch, it's set because the torque of that bearing is predetermined by its, engineered intent. I hope that makes some sense. If you guys have questions, please type it into chat here. Now, this one-way roller bearing gets pressed into our bearing housing, which is also stainless steel. This one is heat treated as well. And this is what helps support the one-way roller bearing. And it provides us a keyed surface. So we need to both hold some plates that will spin with the cage and other plates will stay stationary inside of the knuckle. That might sound confusing now, but as we go and disassemble this, this clutch in a minute, you'll be able to see kind of like you know, what I'm really talking about here. So then we have two composite friction discs. So both of these plates are you know, they have this kind of wavy outside lobed pattern. So these actually stay stationary in the derailleur's knuckle. And again, I'll show you kind of exactly what I mean in a second. We put holes in these because they need to retain grease. This grease is really important to allowing the clutch to kind of slip in a way and be really smooth without being you know, sticky. So has to have some holes to allow the lubricant to flow through there. Then we have a intermediate friction plate, and this is steel. Now, if you look closely, you can see this hex pattern is the same hex pattern we have on the bearing housing. So this plate spins with the bearing housing. This is made of a hardened steel. It is treated so that it has no corrosion, and it is sandwiched in between those two white plates. So it allows a good friction mating surface. It's easy to clean, and again, it spins with the bearing housing and not with those composite friction discs. All right, now moving on again, we have this pressure plate. This is basically like the top compression cap on your stem. You know, when you go to tighten your headset down, that's what creates compression on the whole system. So this plate here is pressing all of these plates into this shoulder on the bearing housing. And that compression and the friction between these plates is physically what creates the clutch force. So it's like a big washer that keeps all the lubricant in the holes, as well as creates the clamp force needed on all of these plates, so that we actually have an output of clutch force when we spin the cage in one direction. These are disc springs or Belleville washers. They are cupped convex springs, and basically like they're like washers almost, and they help us adjust this clutch force. Now you need to have some, it's called normal force on the plates, and that's what's created by these two little springs, and they actually work really well. I don't know if you guys know anything about these Belleville washers or disc springs, but they're pretty cool. We see them in some other engineering applications, but it is something that, yeah, you guys can kind of check out on your own, but both of them are needed to create the normal pressure. And then, of course, we have the adjustment screw that, when we tighten, compresses all of these together. So this is what the exploded view of the tri-pack clutch looks like. I think this makes, you know, some pretty good sense. It's good to see it in this format here before we move on to the next step. But now I am going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to go back to here. I think you guys can see my hands now. And I'm going to show you guys how to take out and adjust this clutch. So there's a couple tools you'll definitely need. This is just, you know, Park tool, Allen key set. It has a 1.5 to a 6 on it. We will only be using, I think, one of these. And then we have a 17 millimeter cone wrench. You can also use an adjustable wrench or a bench vise if you'd like. This is to hold the bearing housing. You'll need some molybdenum disulfide. grease. This is a graphite-based lubricant. This is used in roller brakes. These are easily available through any auto parts store. I believe we might have some of this that we will sell on our website. We don't currently. You could use other greases. This one works the best. So some more information about that later. And then, yeah, you'll need a torque wrench for sure if you want to adjust a tri-pack clutch properly. There's two styles. This is a clicker where it actually makes a little click noise when you get to the torque. And then this one's a dial. I really prefer the dial torque wrenches because you can see exactly how much torque output you're getting from that clutch. And then on our torque wrench, of course, I don't know if you guys can see this. This is a T25 socket. So don't need too many tools. You will need denatured alcohol or isopropyl alcohol to clean all the plates before we put them back together, and you know, a junk rag, something you don't mind getting dirty to wipe everything down. All right. So the first thing we're going to do here is we have to remove this clutch cover. Now, I just took this out of the box. I haven't touched this derailleur at all. It's brand new. Yours might be dirty. I would highly suggest cleaning the outside of the derailleur as much as you can before you open this up. Really don't want to get a lot of dirt or dust in here, as it could cause, you know, some grittiness or bad feeling to how the cage moves of the derailleur. So I'm just going to pull all these screws out. And these are a 2mm Allen, super easy. So once we pull these screws out, I always like to try to put stuff off to the side just to kind of keep it organized. This cap has a seal on it. So to get the seal to come off easily, if you just spin the cap just a little bit, now you can see these holes for the cap and the knuckle are not aligned. The whole thing just pops off super easy. You can try to pry it off with a screwdriver, but if you just spin the cap and it pops right off, really easy to do. Now you guys can kind of see in here, I'm trying to hold it in the light so you can really see it. You can see the clutch mechanism here. So these generally just pull out. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but I just took my fingernails and I just pulled it out, and then it slides right out of the derailleur. And now you can see, I'm trying to hold this in the light so you guys can kind of see better. I thought the lighting in here was pretty good. But you can kind of see the lobed pattern on the inside of the knuckle here, which matches the same, you know, kind of lobed pattern that we see on the outside of these white plates. These have to be aligned when we take this out or put it back in. So, you know, if I go to put this thing back in, it's really easy to do if all of those are aligned. If you have them off, it won't go back in. So, you know, pretty easy. But again, you know, just take my fingernails, just pull it out. If you need to use a needle nose plier, you can. If it's, you know, tough to get out of there, one of the other tricks is if you take a little bit of pressure off the cage just by preloading it a little bit, it'll pop right out really easy. So a couple little tips and tricks in there just from someone who's taken far too many of these apart. But yeah, so now we have a derailleur without a clutch, and you can see it's very easy for me to push in this direction. As where before with the clutch in there, I'll just pop it back in so you guys can kind of see. I'm lining up the discs, pushing it back in. Now if I go like this, you know, it's much more difficult to do that, but only in one direction, only on the forward swing of the cage. Okay, pull this out. Now we need two tools to take this apart one step further. Again, this is a 17mm cone wrench, which is what we designed this for, but you could use a adjustable wrench, you know, whatever your heart desires. I like the cone wrenches because I worked in a bike shop for about 15 years. So, you know, these are handy, they're easy to use. So I'm just holding the 2 wrench flats. There's 2 flats on the back side of the bearing housing. And I'm going to loosen this up. And then one thing I have to note, I'm not sure I mentioned it before, but the Box 2 clutches are not adjustable. So you will not be able to do this service with a Box 2 clutch. This is only applicable to Box 1, and I'll show you why. Now I'm going to remove these parts. One of the key features on this small bolt that we were talking about, the compression bolt, the first part that we talked about, it has an extremely fine thread on it. And this is what allows us to adjust the clutch force, you know, pretty accurately. When it has a coarse thread on it, you tighten it a little bit and it tightens the clutch a lot. So key feature. Now we're going to take out the 2 disc springs. You see 1. Here, this one's 2. One's kind of in there, so I'm going to use this. So these are cupped. So right now I have them facing down. So it's like if they were a bowl, the face of the bowl would be facing down. That's how they are designed to be oriented on this pressure plate. So pretty simple, but you have to make sure that they're oriented the correct way. Now I'm just going to pull up on some of this and we'll be able to take it apart. Again, here is the pressure plate. I'm just lining this all up in order so you guys can kind of see it. We have friction disc number 1. This one, and then, yeah, maybe using a flathead screwdriver instead of my fingernails would be better, but just pulling this off the keyed section. So you can see here, again, the inner hex matches the outer hex here. So this plate spins with the bearing housing. And then we have our last friction disc, and then the housing. So now you can see all the pieces laid out here. Very simple, right? I don't know, maybe I make it look a little easy because I've done this far too many times. But what I wanted to talk about was why a Box 2 clutch is not adjustable and is not serviceable. So on Box 1, we added this, and it's hard to see, and it wasn't in the exploded view that I showed you earlier, but it has this black insert here. Now what this insert does is keeps this bolt tight without having to use Loctite or any kind of staking or any other feature to keep it from backing out. That's really important because as you guys know, not only does the cage of the derailleur move when you shift, but it also moves a lot when you're going downhill and stuff. So if this thing's constantly, you know, banging around, it's very likely that this bolt can come loose. You know, we've seen it in a lot of testing, and that's why our Box 2s are permanently locked from the factory. So they're set to the torque that we deem best fit for that application, and it's the same torque spec that this one comes set out of the factory, but it's permanently set. Now, it allows us to make a more affordable clutch because inserting this little plastic ring in here and manufacturing this little plastic ring is actually very expensive. So by doing that, it again makes it affordable. And then, you know, obviously we have our limited slip clutch like I talked about a little earlier, which makes it much more simpler. So you could see just the difference here, 2 parts versus 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I guess. 9 if you include the plastic ring. But it is important to note, I would not recommend trying to break the locking feature on a Box 2. It will damage the clutch. So yeah, definitely don't do that. But if you have a Box 1, this is pretty easy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some denatured alcohol and I'm going to spray it on this rag. Now, this rag may look really dirty and it's got some stuff on it, but it's been washed, so it's got no dirt. You want to make sure when you clean these parts that you're not using like a dirty rag or anything that's got grit in it, for two reasons. One, if we get any dirt or grit or sand inside the one-way bearing that's on the backside, which this bearing is not removable. It's pressed into this housing permanently. There's no way to get it out. It's a permanent feature of this housing. Yeah, so if you get a bunch of dirt and stuff in there, you're gonna have a bad time. Now, again, yeah, it looks like this rag's a little dirty, but it's been washed. I reuse these rags. We get them from a local supplier here. It's a microfiber, non-lint rag, pretty simple. I'll wash them after they get all dirty like this. I'll just throw them in the washer. But yeah, now you can kind of see, right, all cleaned up. This is a fiber reinforced composite material. It's very similar to some of the materials you'll see in like a motorcycle style clutch. And then again, you can kind of see the holes in it and the lobe pattern on the outside. So that's that. Pick this damn thing up. Okay, so here is the intermediate friction plate. I'm just going to clean this off. And on this one, you can see the keyed section on the inside. It's got no lobed pattern on the outside, so it does not spin with the knuckle. Nice and clean. Clean this one up again. Again, our outside friction pressure plate. This one is also keyed to the bearing housing. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. So we have to make sure we get all these things lined up when we go to tighten it. And then these don't have any grease on them, so they don't really need any cleaning, especially because it's brand new. But here you can see all the pieces cleaned up. And yeah, pretty simple. The best part about this is that you don't have to take the cage off to do this service, right? So anytime you're messing with a spring-loaded assembly, you know, it can become more difficult. Our cages are actually pretty easy to take on and off, but this isn't required. Additionally, we have done extensive testing with these clutches, and when we actually designed some of the first ones, we torture tested them to see how long they would last and need adjustments. And we have some tests with over 2,500 miles where there was no drop off in clutch force ever with a tri-pack clutch. So that's why if you have a Box 2, you really shouldn't need to adjust it. Now, if you wanted a Box 1 because maybe you're not riding super rough terrain and you want it to feel a little bit lighter, yeah, you could adjust this down a little bit and it might feel a little smoother. And if you're riding really rough terrain and you want to turn it up a little bit, or maybe your frame has an elevated chainstay, so you need that higher clutch force not to have chain slap. You know, those are two pretty specific examples. But yeah, this is something that you could do, you know, in your garage or, you know, wherever, fairly simply. But now we're going to put it back together, and I'm going to put it back in and show you guys how to adjust it. So again, I'm going to go back to this molybdenum disulfide grease. And you can see it's got this nasty black color. It's got graphite in it. And this graphite is what helps help create friction between these plates. You can use standard grease. Sometimes you'll have to tighten the bolt more. I would probably, you know, I've seen some of these. Maybe we can provide a link to this on our website. I've seen link to, or some of these greases go for, you know, pretty cheap, like less than $10. And this is like, if you're going to use this for just your clutch, this is like a lifetime supply for every derailleur ever made by us. So a bit overkill, but good to know. Now, the way I always do these is I'll start from the bottom up. And let me push some of this stuff up so you guys can see better. Okay, and I will just do 2 little baby dots. These are a lot to function well. And on this first layer, and you can kind of see these friction discs are kind of see-through. So when I push this down and spin it, the color of the grease, you can actually see through the plate, and you can see where it's, or when it's distributed all over. Now we'll go to the next one, and I just put 2 like tiny little baby dots on each one. And then on any of these ones with the holes, I try to just spread it around. I'm actually not like pushing on this applicator to, you know, get a lot of grease out of here. I'm just very lightly smudging this around so it's in all these little holes. When we go to tighten this down, it's going to push out any excess grease, and we're going to clean that up at the end. So you don't have to worry about over greasing because there's physically not a lot of room for this grease to sit. So here's my intermediate disc. Now this one we have to line up with the bearing housing because it's got that hex pattern that keys to the bearing housing. And just drops on just like that. Now I'm going to do just 2 little dots. This plate doesn't have any holes in it, so it's fairly simple. The second friction disc, I'm going to spin this around until it, yeah, so you can kind of see the grease is all spun around in there. And then we're going to fill all these little holes with grease again. And these holes are pretty important because, as I was saying before, when we go to tighten this down, it's going to push out a lot of grease because when you have all these flat plates, you know, clamped together, there's physically nowhere for the grease to sit outside of these little holes. So it's a pretty key feature here. All right, now we have our outside pressure plate. I'm just going to line this thing up and press it on, and you can see already we got a little bit of grease pushed out. And then I always put just a little grease where the disc springs sit. So here's number 1 disc spring. And the reason is it really doesn't need the grease, but it helps hold it in. So if I flip this upside down, you know, the whole thing doesn't fall apart. It's easy to handle. Let me pick this stupid spring up. There we go. And now we can thread it in our screw. Now you don't need to grease or lubricate or Loctite this because we have that plastic insert that helps put pressure on the threads, which helps keep this from locking up. Okay. I'm using a 17mm cone wrench again. I'm going to snug this up. Should probably support it from the back side. This is where having a bench vise is maybe a little easier. I don't have one that's really easily accessible for videos like this, so that's why I'm just doing it with a simple hand tool, which I also think is more accessible. Not everybody has a bench vise at their house, but if you do have a bench vise, you know, you can imagine having 2 hands free because it's clamped in there. It makes it easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and, you know, tighten this thing down. And you can see some of the grease, you know, coming out. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's kind of hard to see on here. Oh, this thing's slipping all over the place. So let me just tighten this here. Okay. So now that we got it together, you want to wipe it all down, make sure the outside of this thing's really clean again. So, you know, we really can't get to the areas where we want the grease to stay. So you're not going to be able to wipe away any grease you don't want. You just want to make sure this thing's clean. Now again, this whole knuckle here where the clutch sits, it's all sealed. So you don't really have to you know, worry about it. If there's too much grease in here, it's not a big deal. We just want to make sure this thing's clean and that we're not getting any grease on the inside of the one-way bearing, because then it could slip early, and we don't want to get any dirt inside of anything here. So I'm gonna, again, we have to line up these white outside lobes to the inside here. It's really that easy. So just snaps right back in. You just want to make sure it's all lined up. Now, a cool feature that we have on here, which one of our competitors does as well, is on the back side, on this screw right here, we have a spot for a T25 that just drops right in there. This is how we measure clutch force. So on a derailleur like this, we're looking between 3 and 4 Newton meters, and it's measuring both the clutch force and the cage spring force. All of these numbers are on our service page for the derailleur manual. I don't have detailed instructions yet for how to do this service. That's why we're doing this webinar. Maybe we'll use this for some of those resources, but the clutch force numbers are in there as far as the adjustment specs. So again, this is a dial torque wrench. You don't have to use a dial one. These are generally, more expensive. I want to say this one was about $180, so it's kind of up there. But you can also use a clicker style like this one. This one's made by Pedro's. Park Tool has them. There's non-branded ones on the internet. One of the big things with any kind of clicker style torque wrench is that whenever you go and you store it, you have to make sure that it is set to its lowest torque and that the spring is loose in here. Otherwise, they'll become inaccurate. It's another reason why I really like these dials, because they almost never come out of adjustment. They're super accurate. They're really reliable. They're more expensive, but even some of the digital ones that I have at my house, I've spent $300 or $400 on a torque wrench. And I honestly still don't think that they're as good as these dials. So these are really good to have around. But you will need a torque wrench, whatever one you have. It could be, a cheapy analog one, but we need to be able to measure how much force is being output by this. So I'm putting my finger on the clutch shaft here, and we're gonna have to turn this one. We're gonna start low. So whenever you tighten a stem or a seat post or whatever, you don't want to go and start all the way at the high end torque. And it's the same with this. I'm going to go to the bottom of that spec, which is 3 to 4 Newton meters. And I'm just going to hold this and rotate 90 degrees and see where this breaks. So it looks like we're right at about, see, yeah, it goes about 45 degrees before it breaks. So we're a little over 3 Newton meters, which is okay, because it means that we're getting there. We're in the ballpark. So I'm going to turn this up to 4, which is a half turn on this dial. Actually, that's 5. There's half turn. And yeah, so we're in between 3 and 4 Newton meters, because right now I can go to 90 degrees and it doesn't click, right? So with any kind of wound spring, right, we have a spring that's inside of here that returns the cage. As that spring rotates further, the force goes higher. So we can actually see that happen on a dial like this. And hopefully this will stay in focus and I can hold it in the right angle so you guys can kind of see. But yeah, so right now we're about 3 Newton meters. You guys can just see how much more accurate this is, right? So right about 3. So I want to increase this because, I don't know, maybe I'm riding some more difficult terrain. So we're going to pull this thing out of here. Again, you can just super easy to pull out, right? And I am going to tighten this just a little bit. We're going to go about 1/8 of a turn. Now, once you get kind of close to your desired clutch force, it doesn't take too much to get it to go up. So we're going to just try this one more time. Hopefully I am getting in the ballpark here. Yeah, so right now we're at 3.2. Give it another 1/8 of a turn. Oops. So this is one of those cases like I was talking about before, where if you just preload the clutch a little bit, or the cage, then it makes it easier to pull out. Do another 1/8 turn or so. And you guys can see just how easy it is to pull this thing out, you know, and put it back in. That's really the goal here. You know, it's really, really crucial that, you know, these things are easy for you guys to service. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but right now, oh, I'm not even looking at the screen. So right now, let's see if you guys can see. It's hard for me to hold this. Right now we're about 3.5 Newton meters of clutch force, and it's hard to do without a torque wrench, but you can feel this thing is very smooth, has a lot of force still, right? Snaps back easy. You know, these are kind of some of the things that we're looking for. Keys that you know something is wrong. If at any point in time you have any derailleur, not just ours, that doesn't want to rotate forward and snap back easily, you might have something wrong inside of this area. Either the cage spring is maybe damaged, the clutch is junky, you know, maybe it got dirty or wet. All of the components inside of here are corrosion resistant, so it shouldn't rust. That would be very difficult to make happen. But you know, if you live by the ocean or if you put your bike in some salt water, you'll see some stuff rust that you would never expect. So that's pretty much how you clean it, adjust it, install, remove it, you know, all of the keys that you would need. And then, yeah, the last thing, obviously, we would want to put this clutch cap back on, tighten those 3 bolts back down, you know, be good. I think this explains most of it. If you guys have any questions, please type them into chat. I think, you know, I'm not going to put this back on, so in case you guys, you know, have some questions, you know, this really helps. I do have one question from Vidya, looking at Pivot Tech. So our cable stay arm here is on a pivot. And what this does is if you know, put your bike down on the drive side, say in the back of your pickup truck or something, it actually allows the derailleur parallelogram to move instead of bending your derailleur hanger. It definitely works. It works better when you're in the higher gears or the harder gears versus the low or light gears. But this is one of the, you know, the features that we have here. Let's see, I guess we have some more questions. Let's see if I can pull some of these up. Eric, is there a minimum or maximum adjustment on the clutch, or is it based purely off of shifter feel? So it's not related directly to shifter feel. Shifter feel definitely is a combination of a lot of factors. We were talking about the cable routing in your frame, the types of cable housing that you use are very important. We don't include cable housing with any of our drivetrains. The best cable housing that I would recommend, and that actually comes with a lot of our competitors' derailleurs, would be Shimano SP41. That's their good housing. I would recommend that. The requirement for how we adjust this is based purely off of the output of the clutch, right, on the backside, so we can actually adjust or measure how much force is being output through the rotational axis of the cage. And that is 3 to 4 Newton meters. I believe these are set to 2.0 to 2.4 Newton meters from the factory. Is just the clutch by itself. but because we're measuring the clutch plus the spring here, it ups that to 3 to 4 Newton meters. So yeah, not related to shifter feel, although you could use it to help with that a little bit. A lot of the times the shifter might feel heavy because of the cable routing on your frame, your B adjustment. If you don't have enough B adjustment and the upper pulley is maybe hitting on some of the gears, it'll definitely feel more difficult on the shift lever. So those would be the 2 first things that I would check out before adjusting your clutch. Let's see. Steven is asking, what would be recommended usage for the box 3 and 4 clutch strength? I'm looking to do a 4 group for a hardtail that will see light to medium jumps. We have tested these on some dirt jumpers with drivetrain, and they work. But I will say, if you're doing any kind of jumping, it's very clear that a box 1 or 2 derailleur is going to do much better on your bike. And that is because you can adjust this on a box 1, and the longevity of this clutch is very long, right? So this will last and provide consistent clutch output for thousands and thousands of miles without any kind of real servicing need. What I showed you guys today isn't really necessary. It will make your clutch maybe a little bit smoother after a couple thousand miles of riding, but from the factory, they're set to the optimal torque. Both box 1 and 2 have features on them that do not allow it to adjust on its own. So yeah, we really have very few customers that will do this service, but it is something that you can do, so we like to show it to people. I would definitely recommend, if you're going to do a hardtail that will see light to medium jumps, looking at a boxer 1 or 2, mostly because of the jumping. If you're just riding it around, you're chill. But great question. If you have other questions, please type them in the chat, let us know. How often should you clean and maintain your box clutch? That's a great question. Like I was just saying, we have some of these out there with, 3,000 to 5,000 miles on them that will never serviced and work perfect. Now, it is completely dependent upon your riding environment. We have a really good seal on the clutch cap here, so no water is going to really, or dirt, particulate, is going to get in through the front side. And then on the back side of the knuckle, I don't know if I can take this out so you guys can see it. This is one of my demo ones, so it's kind of stuck in here. So on the back side of the clutch, there is an O-ring that sits in the pocket in the bottom of the knuckle. So even from the back side, from the cage side, really not too much that's going to get in here. We've done some testing where we submerge the whole derailleur into a water dirt mixture, and this area is probably the most protected area on the derailleur for a reason. So yeah, again, we don't really have a defined service interval for this because we have some derailleurs out there with thousands of miles that don't really need it. I would say after 2 or 2,500 miles, take it out, take a look at it. If it's working good, just put it back in and don't touch it. But you could do what I just did here whenever you'd like. There's really no adverse effects to servicing it more. But they're bomb-proof, dude. These don't really need too much loving. They just work, and that's why we went with this, because this is very similar to an adaptation of a motorcycle style clutch, which sees much higher loads, is much more beat on, right? If you look at some of the motorcycle style clutches, they get hammered. Some of those bikes put out a lot of torque. But yeah, same material, same kind of concept. So shouldn't need to be serviced very often, if at all. Completely dependent upon your riding scenario. Thank you for the question. Thomas has a question. So older models require cage removal. The older models with the cam clutch, I don't know if I have one that's here. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I have. Okay, so on these, which have the cam clutch, the main thing that you can tell the difference is the height of the cap. Let's see if I move some of this stuff out of the background so you guys can see better. The cam clutch cap is very short. It's not very tall. The tri-pack clutch cap is very tall. So this is a really easy way to tell the difference between the two. With these, you will need to remove the cage. That is something that you can do by removing the cage stop, spinning the cage around, and then you can remove the actual whole clutch. Through making these for a few years, we realized that that's not the most friendly user experience because, yeah, again, whenever you're dealing with spring-loaded assemblies, you know, they can snap back and snap on your fingers, and, you know, it's much easier to just be able to take this cap off and pull the derailleur out like I showed you guys, right? So, you know, that was really the, you know, one of our goals and one of the main things we wanted to upgrade when we did this. Better clutch force output, better serviceability, easier to pull in and out of the derailleur, you know, and then not needing as much service. The older cam clutches really needed to be serviced because they used a friction was based off of an O-ring. Obviously, as you guys know, rubber is soft, just like the tires on your car, they wear out. So they need to be replaced more often. This isn't something I'm going to really detail in this video because it's no longer a product that we sell. If you guys have questions about these, send me an email, please. Ethan@boxcomponents.com, ETHAN. But great question, Thomas. Thank you for that. Let's see. Eric is asking about, can the clutch adjustment be tweaked without removing the clutch assembly? It can, but it is highly inaccurate. The reason being is that when you turn the adjustment bolt, what can happen is the whole assembly can spin inside of the knuckle. So you cannot tell how much you're actually turning the adjustment bolt. That's why you need to use a bench vise or 17mm cone wrench or something like this to make sure that when I go and I tighten this, that it is only tightening how much I want it to tighten, because a small turn on this does make a pretty decent output difference in clutch force. So it's something just that's, you know, pretty important. So I would definitely recommend removing it. Like I showed you, it's super easy to pull out. And that's just a more accurate, repeatable way to get adjustments on your clutch force. But yes, you could technically just turn this bolt and it may or may not adjust the clutch force. It depends on how much thread pressure is being put on that bolt from that plastic insert, which does vary because of you know, tolerancing for fasteners is, you know, sometimes difficult to control on our side because they're purchased, you know, it's a purchase part. But I think that's it for questions. If you guys have any more questions, you know, please let me know through chat. Feel free to send me an email, ethan@boxcomponents.com. We do have a poll for you guys, like we do for all of these. These help me do a better job and, you know, kind of get some information from you so that I can continue to do these. Chloe just put it up on the screen. So if you guys could please give me your feedback, it's super helpful. Let me see here, give me 1 second. Hey, Chloe, I sent you a little chat in the doc. Okay, so for anybody that has attended this meeting, we will be sending you a discount code through email, which is what you registered with. It will be for 15% off. We appreciate you guys, you know, letting me talk to you for an hour. I know I try to give as much information out in these as possible. We're going to consistently do these every other Thursday. So the next one will be in 2 weeks. We'll have a special guest. Vincent Tupin, Vinny T, will join us. So we can ask him some questions. I have some questions for him. He is a shredder, if you don't know who he is. Red Bull Rampage rider, absolute, solid on a bike. So if you guys have any questions that you want to ask him, definitely join that. It will not be a technical chat like this one was. It'll be a little bit more person-to-person interview style. So, if you're interested in that, some of this stuff I think is it's fun to watch, but the technical stuff for me is fun for sure, but can be boring. But I hope I give you guys information that you like. Hope it helps maybe set up your Box Prime 9 drivetrain. This should be applicable to any 11-speed Box 1 or 2 rear derailleur. They are the same. It's not just the Prime 9s. So it is, pretty easy to service thing. Let's see here. I guess we will be doing a giveaway in the next one too. That's cool. Yeah, Chloe, you can share the results. But yeah, again, I appreciate all of you guys hanging out with us. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, ethan@boxcomponents.com. If you have any topics that you want me to cover in these webinars, let us know. That's really helpful. I want to be able to answer questions that you all have for us. I'm trying to give areas of my expertise where I think may need maybe some guidance, but overall, pretty simple, pretty easy. I hope this was helpful. Let's see, what was the poll? What did the poll say? Only one person out of 16 thought this wasn't helpful, so that's okay. For whoever it was that did not think it was helpful, let me know. Any feedback you have is super helpful for me to do a better job. So, as we're all at home or starting to go back to work, we have something to, kind of do during the day. But that's it for today. I hope you guys had a good time. Feel free to reach out to me in the future. And yeah, not this coming Thursday, but the Thursday after, we'll have Vinny T on. So hope you guys all have a good day and be safe out there. Go for a bike ride. See you guys.